Victoria Falls is the country's premier tourist destination and is home to the majestic waterfall. Events over the past few days had raised fears that the situation might degenerate into a crisis and thereby negatively affecting the performance of the local tourism industry. World over, the travel and tourism industry is sensitive to any political instability. Will the recent peaceful resolution to the political challenges reaffirm the country as a safe and hospitable destination? I will be asking my guests that and more questions in the next interview. Zimbabweans are still reflecting on the historic moment when former President Robert Gabriel Mugabe decided to step down as the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe. And joining me here to discuss further on the implications of this recent development on the tourism industry and the way forward is the President of the Association of Tour Operators, Mr. Clement Mukwasi. With all eyes on Zimbabwe and some expecting the worst to come out of the political situation that we had, we managed to resolve our differences in a peaceful manner. What message did the people of Zimbabwe send to the outside world?
All right, the first thing that Zimbabwe did greatest was investing in education from 1980. I take it that the reason why people behaved in such a civilized way, even in difficult circumstances, was because of the level of literacy, the level of education people have, and the level of service that people have been giving out here in the tourism sector is a service that actually promotes unity, development, peace, and living together well. So the message that we're sending out there to the world is that nations must educate their people, nations must educate their children, nations must educate their adults, and when difficult times come, people behave collectively, not in a barbaric way, but in one of the best ways that is unthinkable elsewhere in the world.
Had things gone wrong and there was political instability in the country, what would have been the impact on the travel and tourism industry?
That could have been very, very, very serious. It could have led to very, very disastrous consequences. As you know, every other time our source markets issue travel warnings or travel bans, there is quite a huge implication on our tourism sector. The tourism industry is a very, very sensitive industry. It will not in any way survive a situation of instability. It will not survive a situation of threat. It will not survive a situation of a failure of change. If this change had not happened in a very good way, I'm telling you, hotels could actually be closing now. Most of the nobody would want to travel to a country where there's chaos. Even our own domestic tourists who are supposed to be coming through to Victoria Falls to other places during Christmas holiday, they could have cancelled their travels because there would not be any safety in traveling.
To what extent did the previous travel warnings issued by the major source markets, as well as the negative perception on the destination, affected the performance of the travel and tourism industry?
Firstly, hunting almost died because of the travel warnings. Secondly, the non-consumptive tourism also almost died because of travel warnings. Our major source markets are Europe and America. And if travel warnings come from those destinations, as well as the Eastern Bloc to some extent, if travel warnings come from those source markets, we surely have a seriously constricted number of people coming through to the destination in Zimbabwe. Most people listen to the voice of their governments. As a result, you find very, very few individuals who decide to defy their governments and go to destinations after having heard their governments pronouncing travel warnings. In the past, when these warnings were issued, the tourism arrivals here went down by more than 30%.
Before we continue with our conversation, I want you to listen to what some tourists said following the news that President Robert Mugabe had resigned. Let's listen.
Absolutely jubilant! This is wonderful! What an amazing thing! Amazing for the country. Well done, guys!
I'm very happy for your people that Mugabe is gone.
I'm very happy for Zimbabwe. I hope it will get better for them.
I think Zimbabwe has never seen a better day. It is a good day for Zimbabwe.
What is your comment on the reactions by the tourists?
Oh yeah, what the tourists is simply saying is that the ball is in our court as Zimbabweans. Nobody is going to come in and create a pristine environment for us other than ourselves. We are the masters of our destiny. We are the custodians of our own history. We are the custodian of our own constitution. It is up to us to prove to the world that we are worth being visited. And if we indeed do the right things, we are going to work beyond our capacities.
From a tourism point of view, what are your expectations from this new regime?
The first thing is that we had on terms of that number complained about the number of roadblocks on our highways. We hope that the new dispensation is going to remove unnecessary roadblocks from our highways, because that had actually started to work as an impediment to free movement of domestic tourists and international tourists who decide to drive into Zimbabwe. By the way, South Africa is actually one of the major contributors of tourism in this country, and most of South Africans do not fly into the country. They prefer to drive through, seeing all areas within Zimbabwe. And there are also some other people who come into Victoria Falls, who come into Harare, who come into any area of Zimbabwe with quite a number of days to drive around the country. But they were dissuaded from doing that because of the number of roadblocks that were being mounted on our highways. Most tourists do not know the domestic laws of any country, so they would not take a risk and drive around the country if there were so many roadblocks. So we implore the new administration to ensure that they exercise caution, they exercise due diligence, they take seriously our advice and minimize police roadblocks. If there are going to be police roadblocks, then there must be a complete eradication of corruption by officers on those roadblocks. That's number one. Number two, we also expect the new dispensation to enable the investment in environment in the tourism sector by ensuring that we have got a licensing authority. At the moment, if one wants to come into the industry and invest as a new player in the game, they have to visit at least 21 offices.
One can argue that the transformation of the domestic economy and the growth of the tourism industry requires a collaborative approach where government has a role to play and the industry players equally have a role to play. From your assessment, what should be the role of the local tourism players?
What we must know is that the government is not in business. It is there to govern. It is us, the industry, who are in business. So our primary role, number one, is in giving excellent service so that we complement the environment that the government will have created. Number two, we must actually have marketing collaboration with government. We know different arms of government, from Foreign Affairs to Zimbabwe Tourism Authority and other agents of government, are out there in the world trying to create diplomatic relations and good relations with the international community. As the private sector, we have people whom we have access to. We've got insurance companies that we have access to. We've got airlines that we have access to. We've got travel agents that we've got access to. We've got international organizations that we've got access to. We must send out a good word. We must be the private ambassadors of our own land, of our own people, of our own country. By so doing, we'll be complementing and corroborating the good things that the government will be saying out.
The international community is still reacting to the news of President Robert Mugabe's resignation. So far, we've heard from the United Nations, we've heard from UK, we've heard from Washington. From your assessment, how important is it for us as a country to prioritize re-engagement with the international community?
Look, this is change that has come after a very, very long time of change. The last change we had was in 1980. We are going to be new change agents. It's not going to be easy for us to re-engage. We don't have the expertise, but we have to learn from those that have had constant changes in their own countries. The good thing is that the international community is actually responding and reacting positively to the change that has bestowed itself upon us. We don't know what's happening in the Commonwealth at the moment, but we know at the time we left there were so many opportunities there. Number one, there were credit lines. Number two, there were networking platforms. We think that those things are still there. We cannot wait to be part of the Commonwealth, for instance. We also want to be a normal country like another country where you don't go out there and a person asks you, where are you from? You are from Zimbabwe. It ends there. We want the aha moment where they say, oh yeah, you are the people who had the transformation which was so peaceful. And people must then have a real feeling of wanting to come in and see us, the people of this country. We have to re-engage with the Commonwealth, like I've said. We have to re-engage as well with the European Union as a whole, so that if there were restrictions, sanctions, or any other limitations whatsoever on the movement and trade between Zimbabwe and those countries, those must be completely removed. Because if we don't do that, we're only doing a disservice not to the government of Zimbabwe, but to the people of Zimbabwe.
The recent political developments comes at a time we've witnessed a rebound in the performance of the domestic tourism industry. We've witnessed an increase in arrival, particularly for this destination. Going forward, what should we do to maintain this momentum, and what would you say as some of the key drivers of growth going forward?
Okay, going forward, number one, we need to remove trade restrictions. Victoria Falls specifically shares its boundaries with 3 countries. Zambia 15 kilometers away, Namibia 120 kilometers away, and Botswana 70 kilometers away. When we want to import foodstuffs that tourists want, we should be able to import them from any of those countries without impediment. When we want to import some of the stuff that are covered by State Instrument 64 of 2017, we must be allowed to import those things for the purpose of ensuring that the service we are giving is of an international standard, and it competes with the destinations, other destinations that we compete against, such as those that are in the other 3 countries. So that's number one. There must be free trade across the countries. We must promote free trade. Number 2, we must seriously consider the Univisa and ensure that we could join with the Zambia, Botswana, Namibia, Angola, South Africa, Mozambique. Whatever person gets into one of the countries must be able to traverse through all other countries without impediment of visas. Number 3, on the visas as well, we must revisit the classifications of visas. At the moment, we've got about 3 classifications that are really relevant to the tourism sector. Those that can apply for visas while at the ports of entry, those that have to apply before they come through, and those that are on free entry. I think in a short period, we might need to open up and say as many as possible, we must be able to get their visas on entry, or at least so many countries must be put on category A, where they're able to come in either without the payment of visas completely, or their visa applications must be done there and there at the border post. That way we will increase the momentum of growth. Number 3, we must also look at capital imports. Yes, we know there's a piece of legislation that is allowing tour operators to import certain goods free of duty, but that SI is actually limited. One of the major things that we use in this industry are buses. Buses are not on that sectoral instrument. We would want to implore the government, the new government, to ensure that they actually expand, even if it's going to be for a short time, for 12 months, for instance. For us to be able to recapitalize, we need to import most of those transporting vehicles free of duty. Because for as long as there's duty, it's a serious impediment. As you know, we are rebounding or resurging from a position of serious restraint in our industry. 2008, we lost a lot of money as an industry. Our foreign currency was forfeited by the Reserve Bank, and most companies didn't get any compensation therefrom. And we have now started to rebuild from scratch. And where we are now, we are at a stage where a very, very small amount of government cooperation will trigger us into a 1997 record.
Mr. Mukwasi, thank you very much for sharing with us your
you.
sentiments as far as the recent political developments are concerned.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All eyes remains on Zimbabwe, with the international community eager to see how the new regime will foster unity, inclusive growth and economic transformation as the country's citizens embarks on a journey to the promised land. The tourism operators are hopeful that the new regime will consolidate the country's status as a safe and hospitable destination.